Yeah, self-direction means that you don't have a boss anymore, right? Who gives you clear task and say, look, this task until this deadline, so that you are in the driver's seat by yourself, and you really have the feeling that you can choose some topics that you want to work on, and then you have more of your own motivation.
Das ist der HSG Student Podcast. Mein Name ist Olli und zusammen gehen wir auf die Suche nach spannenden Geschichten und Persönlichkeiten von der HSG.
Welcome to another collaborative episode of the HSG Student Podcast and the Young Talents Radio by Career Ferry. Today, we would like to talk about recruiting. I think this is a topic many students, at least in my experience, are bothering about quite a lot, especially when they're looking for their first job or when they transition from an internship to a fixed position. And the reason maybe is because in our multi-option society, there are so many options, obviously, and we all want to make the right choice. So recruiting somehow becomes relevant for the employers as well as for the employees. And this is what we're going to be talking today about. My name is Oliver. I am hosting the HSG Student Podcast, which is a podcast that from HSG from the University of St. Gallen to create and document and talk about compelling stories from around and with the students and people that are connected to the University of St. Gallen. And right next to me, not physically, but digitally, is Gary from the Young Talents Radio. Gary, this is your moment for introduction.
What's up, everybody? My name is Gary. I am doing this collaborative episode here with Ollie on behalf of Career Ferry. So if you don't know Career Ferry, it's a live streaming platform that matches employers. We have, for example, LinkedIn, the World Bank, and many international employers. So if you're interested in getting an internship or graduate program or junior position, you can visit careerferry.io. The link is somewhere in the description. And very excited to be here today. It's the second collaborative episode that we do with the HSG Student Podcast. So thank you for listening.
And obviously, we're not the only ones who are going to be participating in this podcast. We brought today with us a recruiting expert. His name is Gerd Winandi-Martin. I hope I pronounce it correctly. He is the leader or leading the career corporate services at the University of St. Gallen, that is basically consulting students with respect to their career ambitions and goals, and connects companies and organizations to the students at the University of St. Gallen. He has been working in the recruiting industry ever since 2007. So, as mentioned, I believe an expert with a lot of experiences regarding recruiting of students and with students. And with that, hi, Gerd. Thank you so much for taking your time today and being with us today.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Olivier. Also nice to meet you, Gary, here in the podcast. I'm looking forward to talk to you about the recruiting process. My name is Gerd. As you mentioned, I'm the head of the Career and Corporate Services here at the University of St. Gallen. Maybe a short introduction to CSC for those students who don't know us. We are the first point of contact for all related questions for the students at the University of St. Gallen. So, for example, if they do want to have a counseling session regarding their CV, or to prepare an interview or a video interview, they can come to us and schedule an appointment. And on the other side, we have direct touch points with the corporate partners. So, for example, we're organizing big recruiting events like the HSG Talents, or now upcoming the HSG Banking and Career Day. So I'm really looking forward to discuss with you the very important topic of the recruitment process for our students.
And maybe, Gerd, before we jump deeper into what the CSC is doing and all your observations about current trends and best practices, let's maybe also talk a bit about you. We noticed that, as mentioned, you have been working, I think, ever since in recruiting. And this really opens up the question to me, why are you so passionate about, coaching, recruiting, employer branding, all topics that you're mentioning in your LinkedIn biography? Were there any, immersive experience that you made during your studies? I think you studied psychology and economics. When you were younger, what's the root of your interest in these
Yeah,
topics?
that's a very, very good question. It really has something to belong with my history and with myself, because after graduation, I studied at the University of Constance, public administration, public policy. And as you mentioned before, I also had different options, right? And I got lost in these different options, and therefore I thought it would be very helpful, or it had been for me, if I would have a counselor helping me. And this was the time I just thought about, yes, the recruitment process getting very exciting and interesting to me. So I started my career at a small startup in Germany, where I gained a lot of experience when it comes to recruitment process, hiring process. And afterwards, I changed my location to Zurich. There I worked 5 years at a personal agency. And there also I get to see a lot of CVs per day. I did a lot of interviews, and I loved that. And so I'm really passionate about recruitment. And after that, I changed my position. I came to the University of St. Gallen. Also with the idea, to help students to find not a position. I don't think that's really, really at the moment, at least, the topic to find a position. I think it's the topic to find the right position. And also this is what we see ourselves in the CSC, to help students to find the right position, a position with a perfect match to them.
And maybe a brief follow-up question to that. If you look back on these, I think, couple of years that you've been working in the industry, can you remember, or can you tell us like one of the most rewarding stories that stick to your mind, apart maybe the one from yourself that you found, I guess, your dream job as you still stick with the industry?
Yeah. I think what comes immediately to my mind as I started here, we also talked about the students, of course, what is important when they're searching for a job. And I mean, that is important to bring on competences. I mean, that's clear. That is important to have a certain kind of interest that I want to bring in a job. That's clear. And what we started there to talk with the students is the topic of the values. Because, and I'm not talking only about an internship. I mean, when they're starting for a trainee or for a full-time position, I think that the value fit is at least that important as the competences and the interests. And there I really see a shift over the years. I mean, when I started, we have a tool called Career Profiler. And the Career Profiler, when you're talking about values, there are 2 items called achievement and power, right? And 2012, these values was the values which were most important to our students. And now over the years, we really see a change. Now these are 2 items that are least important at the moment, right? So what are the values that are most important now are stimulation and self-direction. And there, I mean, we really see a shift also in the recruitment process, because now students are looking for a different career. Not all, of course. But I think the topic of a career changed over the years for HSG students, and this was really something which came in my mind as we had the introduction, which I see where there is really a shift in the recruitment process and what the students want.
You mentioned self-direction. What does it mean?
Yeah, self-direction means that you don't have a boss anymore, right? Who gives you clear task and say, look, this task until this deadline, so that you are in the driver's seat by yourself, and you really have the feeling that you can choose some topics that you want to work on, and then you have more of your own motivation than as a classic career when your boss comes and say, hey, look, you have to do this and you have to do that.
And how do you see, the companies picking up on this topic? Is it like something that they feel like, we have to provide the students with, or is it just, particularly to the ecosystem of the University of St. Gallen that people want to have, self-direction in their job? Because I guess this is not so easy with given, structures and more hierarchical hierarchical ways of organizations working.
Yeah, of course. No, I also don't think that is only related to HSG students, because also we did a survey within our network of career services in Switzerland, and therefore it was very clear that also students from ETH, for example, or University of Zurich, they also have the same preferences, right? So we are talking really about the new generation and the new values there. And I think, the corporates at the moment for me, they are just checking different direction. They're trying out because they notice that maybe the classical career path, now I'm talking about bigger corporates, like is not a good fit for all students anymore, right? I don't tell about that every student is changing now, but for example, we were to a bigger corporate, and they was telling us, like, look, as an example, there was one student from your university, and we really get in trouble, and they mean in trouble because he said them, look, I'm very interested in your company, but I only want to work 60%. Because besides, I have my own startup and I will not leave my own startup. But I'm interested to join your company for this traineeship, right? And then they had a conflict because their traineeship was designed for 100% if you want to work there, right? And with the classical career path and the classical fringe benefits. And the students also told them, look, I'm not interested in these fringe benefits. And now they're seeing, this is only an example how things are changing and that the students want something different. And at the moment, they're just like struggling a little bit and don't know what the students want to accept. So I think this is really a change now when we're talking about career, right? And not foreseeing where this is going on. I also don't have the answer for that. But what we see now is that we are really in a transition phase when it comes to the career topic and
Very interesting. We're going to be talking about some of the current trends that we are seeing in the recruitment space. But before that, we're going to start talking about best practices in recruiting and in applying. And maybe if we have time, we'll also talk a little bit about AI and how it's disrupting many things, including the recruitment process. So in our audience, we have students from different universities listening in Switzerland, in other countries in Europe. And when it comes to job applications, the prestige and the ranking of a university, such as the University of St. Gallen, can be advantageous. However, for some individuals who maybe did not attended a less renowned university, what do you think are the other things that students can present to employers to potentially outperform those who studied at prestigious universities?
Yeah. The problem is here in HR, you can't say it's like this or that. you have to say it depends a little bit, right? And of course, I see your question, but of course it depends if you want to join a bigger company, a big corporate, for example, a very renowned company, or you want to join a startup, for example, because there maybe different things are very important for the corporate. But talking in general, I think also for some industries still, the grades are very important, for example. Not to all. We are seeing that they're getting less important over the years. Also, this is something, Olivier, what I mentioned before, what I see over the 10 years is changing. And I think that's good. But for some industries, the grades are still important. But for me, much more important than the grades, to be honest, is your work experience, right? So what you did in the past. Because this is very important, of course, for the companies to see that you have some kind of work-related experience, right? And there I'm not talking only about the classical internship. So what our corporates are also telling us, look, when you're doing something extracurricular, like you're president of a student club, for example, at HSG, or you're doing something in your free time for your sports clubs, for example. So they also consider this as a work experience, because they know, I mean, when you're just in the middle of your bachelor, for example, you can't have 2 to 3 years work experience. That's not possible, right? So of course, at the different stage you are, they consider this as work experience. Also from them, very important, of course, is IT skills. More and more programming, right? And here they are telling us, look, you of course you don't have to be the perfect type of human being who is a perfect programming expert, for example. but they see it as important that you understand the process behind. So I think students who can show that they did something in the past within the university, for example, when it comes to coding or programming, I think this is very helpful for the students. So I think these three topics is work experience, IT skills, and grades are very important for the students when they want to join a corporate.
And how important is somehow, the congruency of these three elements? Like, for example, myself, I've been digging deep into very different directions. Yeah. And then sometimes, I listen to conversation, with 1 ears of foreign, just people are sitting around me, for example, at Mensa at the university. And then I say, to get this job, I first need to do this internship, then I need to see this area, and then this. So they're really working very focusedly towards one direction. What is your experience? What companies are looking for? Is it like more focused people or more, let's say more diverse people, given also, I think the world becomes, this is a platitude, but the world becomes more complex, and the more perspectives you can add to a certain problem might maybe help solving this problem or this issue.
Thank you for this question. Also a good question. Also here I have to say it depends a little bit. I think that also there becoming a diversity, a broader view is very important for the corporates, but of course you still have some business fields like call it for HSG students, like investment banking, for example. There, if you take my advice, it's still not the baddest idea to be very focused, right? To do an internship and to gain work experience, because for them it's very important, right? For others, like when we're talking about more different industries, different business fields, there I think they're maybe looking for people who have a broader view, broad experience in different fields, because this is exactly what they're looking for, right? So therefore, it's really my advice to have a closer look. Also, first of all, to the job ad, what they want to, and also for me, it's very important if you do have the idea of starting your career in X or Y. It's also very good to have a closer look on LinkedIn, for example. People who started their career in this business field, and have a closer look at their biography, right? What they did in the past, not to say, look, you have to do the same, but also to get a first impression about this business field. Because what I recognize over the years when students are coming to our career counselings, sometimes we have the feeling they are not very well prepared, not in terms of the application thing or something like that they really have a clear idea and a clear focus of what it means to work in this business field, right? And therefore, I think it's very important also to prepare the technical part. Means that you have a good motivation letter, your CV is well structured, everything's fine, right? But also have made your mind about why do I want to start in this business field? Because at latest, this will be the first question in your interview: is that, hey, why did you apply to us, and why do you want to start in this business field? Because they know, of course, from the corporates that the students, they have different possibilities. And my problem as a recruiter is when I'm hiring a student, I don't know exactly why the student is interested in this business field, right? When you have more experienced guys working, for example, 10 years in accounting, and you want to change the job, I mean, it's pretty clear. But when you're applying for an internship, I immediately know that you have different possibilities. So I'm very interested in your motivation for me as a corporate and for the business field. So I think that is also very important to prepare for yourself and made up your mind why you're interested in the business field. And therefore, for example, our alumni network is very, very strong at our university, and that's pretty good. And also there, use the possibility to get in touch with alumni who works in this business field to get a better idea and more information about what it really takes to work in this business field.
And maybe to connect with that, I think, one of also the most common questions that come up during the recruiting process is somehow the story of, walk me through your CV, summarize my CV. I usually think this is a very silly question, because usually, the CV is already a summary of your life. So if you want to be walked through, then just have a look at the CV. But I guess also, in this kind of why did you apply for this job questions. I think, there are very standardized answers to that, because, the reason, what you should say is like, because I love the industry because of ABC. But is there any advice you have to students, to really stick out? This would be the first part of my question. The second part of my question is, I think, particularly also for internships, sometimes you just apply because you're curious about the industry, and how important is it to stay authentic in this sense? Because, curiosity might be minor to someone who says, I really want to dive into it. And what would you advise these kinds of people? So two sub questions basically in one question.
The first thing you mentioned is the question, maybe introduce yourself, right? Or walk me through your CV or whatever that the question is defined. I think therefore what my advice is to take out three points that is your USP, right? And for some students, maybe it is what they are, the grades. For others is extracurricular activities. For others, international experience. But what I would not do is to tell the whole story again, because as you said, they can read your CV, right? This question is meant to see where the students is setting their focus on, right, in their CV. So up to 3 points, and just tell more about 3 points. This could also something be about your motivation. We had last time there was a student there, and he was very, very good in track and field, right? And he was doing this all the time, so he didn't have time for extracurricular or for getting more work experience. And also we defined there to say, hey, look, he should describe himself, his motivation, getting out of the sports activity when he wants to walk the corporate through his CV. And that was really impressive, because he has no work-related experience, but the self-introduction was very good, because he came up with personal points and then make a combination to the job. So I think this was very impressive, right? So again, don't tell the whole story. They can read it. Just focus on 2 to 3 points. And I think the other things, can you again repeat the question, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I think, particularly also for internships, you sometimes just apply because you're curious. You want to get a sense of the industry. But, on the other hand, you mentioned before, it's really important to show your interest and, why do you want to go into this field? And I could imagine, just showing authentically that you're just curious might be minor when you want to get a job, compared to someone who says, I really want this job because I love the industry. And how would you deal with this kind of situation? Because obviously someone who is just curious can also pretend to be very, very, very fascinated about the industry. But in the long term, this might be not the right strategy.
Exactly. But in my mind, there is a reason why he's curious, right? So then write the reason why you're curious. Maybe you it could be different. Maybe you joined a workshop with a corporate and they talked about M&A, for example, and afterwards you were very curious to work in M&A and to get more experience. That would be a perfect, reasonable first introduction for you. Made a motivation letter, for example, why you want to join this business field, or you did a great lecture within this business field and it really inspires you, maybe, or you have a talk with an alumni, for example. So I think their curiosity, it's good and it's fine, it's basic, but I think you also should mention the reason why you're curious about the business field.
So you also mentioned now cover letters, and I have also more questions regarding cover letters and the process before the interview and the best practices around there. So what I learned is, a good cover letter is really this why me structure, why you structure, why the company, and why us structure. But the problem is every motivation letter somehow looks the same, right? So basically, they're pretty equal. And what is your advice? Do you have advice? Do you think one should deviate from this structure, or this is just the cover letter is just the thing you need to do beforehand? But then I really ask myself, what is the value of the cover letter, right? If anyways, every cover letter looks the same.
That's a very good question. I can only tell from my experience as a recruiter, and we did it there, right? So you have different steps in the recruiting process, and normally you do a first selection, right? And this first selection is done by the CV. Yeah, let's take a job and say you have 80 to 100 application, which is pretty normal for a regular internship within a big corporate. And they have to do a pre-selection, right? Because they can't interview 80 people. So from this first pre-selection, they made 40, for example, right? They cut it down until 40. And within this 40, they are now looking for the full application documents, right? The full application documents means maybe you have some work certificates. You have the reference from the university with the grades, etc. So they have a closer look at that. And now it comes that the motivation letter, as the corporates are telling me, is very important for them, because the reason I mentioned before, the recruiter, when it comes to hiring a student for an internship and for a trainee, they doesn't know exactly why they're motivated to start their career in this position. So I think for me, the perfect place is within the motivation letter to tell the recruiters more about why you're really interested in the business field. So the structure you mentioned before, for me, it's very good. But again, what I see, like first sentences is like sentences like, I saw your job at the career platform of the University of St. Gallen, and I like your company because you're an international company. I mean, come on. The students will take this sentence and send it to 40 other companies as well. So this is not very authentic, right? And this is not very individual. So what is very important, that the recruiter has the feeling, yes, you are writing the motivation letter to him, very individual and very authentic. And therefore, of course, you have to redo the motivation letter for every job. This is also something we see when our students, they are just changing the address above, right? And taking the same motivation letter. And don't underestimate the recruiters on the other side. They are pros, right? They are doing the whole day reading CVs and motivation letter. And they pretty get aware of it if you really have invest time in your motivation letter or not. And of course, it's called motivation letter. So the first impression is how motivated are you and how many time you spend in writing your motivation letter. So don't underestimate it. But when we're talking about trends, we see that for some companies, the motivation letter is getting less important. They changed it, right? So for example, if you have a one-click application via LinkedIn, you don't have to write a motivation letter anymore, right? So the algorithm is doing the jobs for the companies, checking if you have a good profile or not. Or other companies, what we see after the pandemic, they do video interviews. So you have to answer questions like, why you send your application to us, what you're good at, what are things you can improve. And more or less, this is the same questions you answer normally in the motivation letter you're now doing via video, right? So maybe there is a change, yes. But I think when I have a closer look at the job ads that are placed on our platform, and when I'm talking to our corporates, I think 80% there is still the regular process for writing a motivation letter, and 20% of the companies, they do have an alternative process where you don't need your cover letter anymore. But I think when I'm looking forward in the future, I will think this will getting more and more that you don't need the motivation letter anymore. And also within the market, we had a great market for the students last year. So you see that the companies are setting down the hurdles to send your application in, right? So we see more and more companies also working via this one-click application on LinkedIn. But then pay attention, right? Because the algorithm is working for you or not. And you really have to have a good LinkedIn profile.
So what are those algorithms looking for? Do you know that? I guess it's a very good mystery that is hidden by LinkedIn, but maybe you have some insights that, all the different, all your recruiter friends, so to say, have found out.
Yeah, I do have a friend. He's a headhunter, and all the bigger companies and the recruiters, they do have a different access to LinkedIn, right? So they pay money to LinkedIn, and then they do have a different access, and they can make much better search than we can do with this normal access to LinkedIn. So, for example, then they are looking for competencies you mentioned in your profiles, right? But again, this is just like a mystery. I also can't explain into detail. I would love I can do, but this is just like a mystery from LinkedIn. But what we really see that students have profiles, they are half ready, and I wouldn't do that. I mean, if I'm present on LinkedIn, then I will present myself in the best possible way. It's the same. You wouldn't send a half-ready CV to a company, right? So it's also make no sense to have a half-ready LinkedIn profile. So there are different reasons which I can understand. I say I don't want to be present on LinkedIn. That's fine. And then you can just have a closer look for jobs, for example. But when you say, hey, I'm present on LinkedIn, and I think that the LinkedIn profile has to be has to be ready.
Very interesting pieces of advice there. I think being authentic, as you said, it's crucial when it comes to motivation letters. And maybe to take a different direction and come back to something you said earlier. You mentioned a very strong alumni network at the University of St. Gallen. And related to this, what do you think is the percentage of people that get a job because they're connected with someone in the company or have someone in their network who will let them take a shortcut in the recruitment process?
Yeah, that's also a very, very good question. There are some statistics that show that we're talking about the gray market, right? That 70% of all jobs are given within this gray market for connections. Only 30% of the jobs, they're placed on job platforms like jobs.ch or something like that. So building up your network very early in your studies is absolutely, it does make absolutely sense because in the future, then for your career future, sometimes it will be very helpful to overcome the first hurdles, right? When I'm talking, you remember before the different steps in the recruiting process. So you have 100 CVs doing the pre-selection. Of course, if you do know somebody within the company, says, "Hey, look, have a closer look at this application because I know him. He is very good." Then of course you are not 1 out of 100. So you're different. So building up that network is crucial.
I think it makes sense. I mean, and there are a lot of ways, right, to get in touch with. If you don't know somebody at the company, you can participate to career fairs and get to know recruiters. There are many ways that you can, get in touch with those people. What would you say would be a good approach if you notice in LinkedIn that, for example, somebody from the HSG or from the university where you studied actually works in the company? How do you approach that person in a gentle and maybe smart way to get a recommendation? What do you think is a good approach there?
Yeah. I wouldn't ask for a recommendation at first. I wouldn't ask for a coffee break, right? I would ask, hey, look, I see now, let's take, for example, I don't know, you work at UBS in a position I also very interested in, and I'm really interested in how you made it so far. So I'm really interested in how was the recruitment process, for example, how is the working culture there? What do you think you can bring on from your studies and from your university? At the other hand, also what is very challenging. And so therefore you give this guy or this girl the expert role, just to gain more information. And afterwards, of course, when you talk with somebody at the end, you can ask, hey, if it's okay if you can give me a recommendation or that you set me in contact with somebody within your company. But I wouldn't do it at first hand, right? Only at the end, because when you at first hand would ask for a recommendation, I mean, I don't know you exactly. Who are you? What is your motivation for that? So normally I wouldn't do it. But when you ask me to give you some information about the recruitment process, I'm fine with that, right?
Makes sense. So rather speak with the person as an advisor. I mean, ask him for advice and inputs on his experience, and then let him decide if he thinks he wants to give you a hand and connect you.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So I think if you don't know anyone at the company, you somehow have to rely on the one hand, external information that you find, and on the other hand, internal information about yourself, what you're really interested in, what kind of what kind of preference you have regarding culture. And I think one tool that you already mentioned that helps in this process is the career profiler, right? And as far as I understood it, you developed that in the career corporate services couple of years ago, and I'd be really interested in hearing First of all, is it only available to HSG students? And on the other hand, somehow, what do you see apart from the trends that you already mentioned from this career profiler? How advisable is it for people to get or to have a look at it at least?
Yeah. As you mentioned, this was a tool we developed together with two experts. One is called Markus Kühne from company Talentwerk, and the other one is Benjamin Berghaus. He also did his doctorate here at the University of St. Gallen. And the reason we developed it at our own was we had a closer look at the market, and that there are a lot of tools. Don't get me wrong, but we had the impression that these tools are made for experience profiles, right? And that we didn't find really a tool for students. We developed it by our own. And I think it's very, very helpful for the students because there's a questionnaire you can fill in. It's 20 to 25 minutes, and you really have to reflect yourself on your motivation, why you're changing. And afterwards, you have some further aspects and insight into your career-related interests, values, and competences, right? And so this is something we are taking before we do our career counseling session called Taking Stock, when students are coming and say, I'm not quite sure where I should start my internship, or at the end of the master, I'm not quite sure where I have to start my career. And with this insight, we try to work out together with the students where it could make sense to start their career or not. And one thing that changed really over the years, like I told you before, is the values. I think, yes, of course, achievement and power for some students is still important. And of course, there are some industries, like I told you before, investment banking, for example, strategy consulting, they're still looking for people who have these values. But I think there is a shift more and more. When we're talking about work-life balance, for example, for more and more students, this is really relevant. It is very important also for the career start. And I think, therefore, with the career profiler, we give really the chance for the students to reflect on themselves, because again, for me, the most important thing more than anything else is that you really find a job which is a match to you, right? A match to you, not only from the competence side. I mean, that's more or less clear. But I really think that you really reflecting on yourself. What do I want to work for a company? Where is the working? How is the working culture there, for example? How is my boss is also very, very important. And there we see that some students don't make up their mind about these points. They really focus on the competence, which is good. But for me, this is also from my experience as a workday recruiter. In 80 or 90% of the times when somebody is leaving the company, he's not leaving the company because he is not able to work with a program or something else. For example, they were leaving the company because they get more and more the feeling that the boss is not a perfect match to them, or the working culture is not a perfect match for them. So we really enforce the students to think about what they want and what they need to perform, right? And so therefore we decided to develop this career profiler.
And does this career profiler also exist for companies, somehow like a company profiler, and then you could match these two elements? Do you have this as well, or is this something that is maybe being developed, or something that is not on the radar?
Yes, we do have this tool. It's called Talent Profiler, and we did last year a survey within our corporate partners with the whole network from Switzerland, from the career services there. And yes, we have the data, and it's pretty interesting also when we're talking about values. There we see also a switch where also the companies are telling, look, we are not looking anymore for pure strong aspiration for power and achievement. We are looking more and more for students who have also this self-direction and stimulating work environment issues, right? So that's really what we see. But what we also see is this was the thing, because I mentioned it before, with interest in data, right? That the companies are wishing from the students that they're more interested in data analysis than they are. So if you ask me where is the biggest gap between what the students are bringing on and what the companies are looking for and wishing, it comes to data analysis, right? And this is not only spoken for HSG, that's also from the whole survey within Switzerland, right? So therefore we see that the need it's getting more and more for the companies to get students who have a broader focus and a certain kind of knowledge when it comes to data analysis.
And I have maybe a brief, maybe critical question or a reflective question. So on the one hand, we say, it's really important to find your match and to invest really time into, finding out who am I, what are my values, which kind of company fits to me, what I want to do. On the other hand, what we see or what I observe in my environment among my friends is really this job hopping thing. So people are switching jobs all the time, every 1, 2, 3 years, people have a new job. So somehow this is really a bit of a mismatch to me. Do you have, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions, but do you have maybe some explanations for this, that we have on the one hand really focusing on what we want to do, and on the other hand we have this job hopping? Because I think a couple of years ago this was not the case. Usually if you start at the place, you would stick there for 20 to 30 years. How do you see this?
I can understand your question. I see it a little bit different, and for me it is not really a mismatch. I mean, when you look back at the times I started my career, it was pretty hard to find a job to job this time, because the labor market was not that good in Germany, so they really didn't have the chance to select, to be honest. Now I think the students, they really have the chance to select. So even that is more important, that you really know what you want, right, than to do a wrong decision. And I think yes, but it is also something you have to grow when you work in a company for 1 to 2 or 3 years. And this is something which I see when it's just like a learning curve, right? You're within the company, you love to work within these companies, but you see that maybe your tasks are not changing anymore, or you do have a working environment that is changing, because a lot of companies, they are restructuring at the moment, for example, and then you go to another corporate and learn something more. So to be honest, now in CVs only, when we do our experienced counseling, this is more and more regular, that you are within a company 2 to 3 to 5 years, and then you change. And I don't think that this is wrong, to be honest. It's just like a different culture, as I mentioned it. And when I look into generation from my father, for example, he also worked 20 years within a company, and that was fine, and that's totally fine. And also now I'm also working 10 years now at HSG, because I love to work at HSG, for example. That's fine, but I didn't think it's wrong that you leave after 1 to 2 to 3 years. Of course, when you're doing this all the time, don't get me wrong, right? When you're doing 10 years and you have 10 different employers, of course, they will ask you, look, what should we do that you stay longer than 1 year, of course, but to a certain kind of level, to changing the jobs, even or even more when you start your career, and you really just like to try to find out what is a good fit for you. For me, that is not bad. And I also don't think, or when it comes to discussion with our corporates, I also don't think for them that this is really a problem. And also, we have students there then telling us, oh, look, I did an internship, but to be honest, it wasn't a good match. Hey, that's fine. That's fine. Also, this also come out. You did it, and you worked there for 2 to 3 months, and you found out that is not good for you. Hey, good, much better than you're starting an entry position or trainee, and then you find it out right then, right? So again, I don't think that this is really a problem.
Makes a lot of sense, and maybe for students listening, because I remember 3 years ago I was still a student, and I had this feeling of I need to find the right thing straight after my studies. And now in retrospective, I realized that we need to give ourselves more time to actually test and try different things, to actually discover what we learn, because there is a big difference between theory and practice. So I think what you said makes a lot of sense, right? It's fine to test different things. You also mentioned several trends, right? You mentioned the need, the increasing need of knowledge about data. You also mentioned the intense competition for talent. We see on social media a lot of hashtag war for talent. And we see that companies are now actively competing to hire students and graduates. are students behaving differently? Are there difference between industries in this shift in power, if we can call it that way?
You mean industry when it comes to recruiting, or you mean students who are interested in a different kind of industry?
Yeah, I mean more industry, for example, students having more choice within the banking industry and maybe a bit less choice within the consulting industry.
Also, there a little bit. It depends. Like take consulting, we have the big four. I mean, there of course it's more competitive to come in that you're applying for other strategy consulting companies, for example. Also, when you want to apply for UBS or you have to have a more competitive environment, and you will have more competitors on the labor market than you have for another company. And I think what I think more at the moment is the topic of the employer branding. You see more and more companies doing more in employer branding. I think also there is the problem not overdoing as a company or not telling something you are not, right? Because then you attract some kind of profiles. And when these profiles notice after they are within your companies that you told something different than it is within the company, they will leave. So Olivier, again, you said before they are leaving after 1 to 2 years. Yes, of course, there are some companies also outside who are doing a lot of employer branding, giving a lot of fringe benefits, for example, to take in the right profiles. But when you are not delivering afterwards, when you're within the company, there is a mismatch, because for me, employer branding starts within the company, right? It is with the company, how you are, who you are not, and then you position your employer brand on the market, right? And what we see now, they are positioning their employer brand on the market, but without having a common ideas what is their USP, for example. And this is sometimes we see as a mismatch. When also students are coming back after an internship very frustrated, telling us, look, they promised me this and that, and they promised me that I can do this task, and they come back afterwards and say, hey, I had absolutely different tasks. And this is something what the companies are also underestimating, because these students come back at HSG and they will tell other students that the internship was not good of this reason. So it's bad for the employer brand when the companies are doing that. And this is something we are always trying within our conversation within the corporates. Look, I fully understand that they have a need for the best profiles, right? And that they are putting the best possible employer brand on market, but they also have to be authentic. We are talking about that the students have to be authentic. It's very important, yes, but for me, the companies, they also have to do the same, right? It's absolutely the same for the companies. And there also we see a mismatch, because now this war for talent thing, to be honest, I can't hear it anymore. Because it's fact. It's fact. It's not like 1 or 2 years. And also there are some estimates I saw when we are talking about in 2025, there is an equal labor market in Switzerland. Equal. You know what that means? Or from 2020, 200,000
What does it mean?
That there are no more applications than of open positions, right? And from 2020 on, I saw on LinkedIn a slide telling us, look, there was in Germany we call it Zeitenwende, that more people are on retirement than entering the labor market. And yes, we will have a problem. And of course that the companies are fighting for the best, and it makes sense. But again, do it in an authentic and honest way. And there we really see it sometimes, not to all, of course, but sometimes there we see also mismatch. Some students, they're not authentic, but also we see some companies that are not authentic, placing their employer brand in the right way, right?
So maybe as a quick follow-up, since we're approaching an equilibrium in the labor market in Switzerland, do you think that students can strategically use this knowledge to maybe be a bit more picky, negotiate salaries, negotiate conditions? If yes, how do you think they should approach that?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think to negotiate salaries, yes, maybe it makes sense, but what we see that this is also something which the companies are taking on to get the best profiles. So I think for the students, it's good. What we see, there is an increase in salaries, for example, right? And also we have then different industry. Maybe you have a smaller fixed salary, more bonus. In other industries, you don't have it. So I think there is important to have a look at the whole package, right? Some have cool fringe benefits. Some have different things. So don't look only at the fixed salary, right? Take a look at the whole package. To be more picky, I don't think that this is the topic. And for me, it's, again, like I said it before, when it's a good match, I mean, one application is enough, right? And what we are seeing at the University of St. Gallen, sometimes students are testing, right? And I can understand. I can fully understand also from my experience as a student. I did the same. But what then could happen, and it's just like a warning signal. They're telling us, look, I sent my application documents to company B, C, D, and E because there I want to train the interviews. And then, only then, I send my application to my preferred companies, right? Okay, you can do that. Then you will get invited for an interview, but you are not 100% convinced. And so you go within this mood, you go into the interviews. And as I told you before, on the other side, there are pros, right? They will notice that you're not fully motivated. So what will happen? You will have a no as answer. First time you will say, oh, it's okay, I didn't want the job. But after the second or third time, the no, maybe you get a little bit unsure. Maybe I did something wrong. And then with this feeling, then you go to your preferred companies. That doesn't make any sense, right? So my advice, don't test, only send your application to these companies you are really looking for and you're really motivated to go for. Otherwise it's waste of your time and it's waste of the recruiter's time. And for me, that's not fair and that's not authentic.
Thanks a lot, Gerd. There's been a lot of valuable inputs today. It's been very informative, and I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of people. Maybe for everybody listening, if you're listening to this on the HSG Student Podcast, you might want to check the Young Talent Radio podcast on Spotify. We interviewed a few months ago the CEO of the Networking Institute in Dublin, and he provided a lot of inputs on how to network as a student. And as Gerd said, there is a gray market, and building connection and networking is something of great value, even when you're still at university. Thanks a lot, Gerd. Oli, I'll let you say a few words to close this.
Oh yeah, and for everyone who joined in as well, make sure to check out the Career and Corporate Services webpage. Check out the Career Profiler if you're still not entirely sure what and who and why you're looking for something. Gerd, maybe I missed it before, but is it open for everyone or just for HSG students?
This is only open for HSG students.
So then this shout out goes to all HSG students and all the others who joined in. Thank you so much for listening. I actually have one last question. It just came to my mind for you, Gerd, before we close. Maybe I think everyone talked about ChatGPT, so we're not going to be the ones who are not going to talk about ChatGPT. Maybe in 3 sentences, what, in your opinion, is the impact of ChatGPT on the recruiting market, or let's say not ChatGPT, but generative AI, especially if we think about, we talked about cover letters before. I think ChatGPT writes perfect cover letters. But what else? What else is out there?
I wouldn't say that ChatGPT is writing perfect cover letters. I would say that ChatGPT is writing good cover letters. But then again, I mean, we tested it, of course, within our counseling team. I tested it by myself, and yes, the result was good. The more information I gave in, the better it was, of course. But there is also no mystery to tell you that. But I think, again, as I told you, we said, look, it's very important to be authentic within the application process, means in the interviews, but also means when you are writing your CV and your motivation. And being authentic means that you're doing it by your own, right? So I think what will happen, ChatGPT will write very good generic application documents, Yes, but if you want to make the difference, if you really want to stand out, you have maybe to adapt it a little bit, right? That you have a good basis. ChatGPT is writing you just like a few basic sentences, but then you have to fill it in with your own ideas and with your own motivation. But I think also, again, when you're looking on the recruitment markets, a lot of companies, when you're asking them, are you having AI for recruiting process? We say, no. we don't have it, right? Of course, all the biases, but I think some of them are not telling the truth as sometimes so they use AI. So I have the feeling we have to deal more and more with AI within the recruitment processes. And there again, I don't have the perfect answer for that yet. We will have a closer look at the career and corporate services. We will also test and learn, and we will talk with companies to get a better feeling of how they use it or not. But up to now, when we are talking about that topic with our corporates, they are all telling us, and this is something which I hear with joy, that they say, look, HR is a business which happens between human beings, right? So we don't want to place AI between these processes. So all of them are telling us that still a human being is looking at the CV and still a human being is looking at the cover letter. And also from my experience and my feeling, that will not change in the next year. Of course, this is not that I say that these tools will not come up and these tools will not be in use. But I think for bigger companies now in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years, I don't think that this will be the new state of the art to have these AI tools in the recruitment process. Because again, a business between human beings and a business where you have to have a certain kind of feeling for profiles, right? And this is something which is the job of a recruiter to pick up the most, to put it in other words, to put the best profiles for this job, right? And the best profile sometimes is a combination of maybe for some the grades are more important for working, as we told you before. As a recruiter, you have the task to make up a new one, which is the best combination in this profile. And I think at the moment it's very hard for AI to do that because this is a lot of experience you gain as a recruiter within the daily work when you see a lot of CVs. So no, I don't think so. But maybe you will tell me this podcast in 5 years and say, hey, Gerd, you are talking a lot of bullshit. I don't know, but my feeling is telling me no, not at the moment.
That was, I think, a great statement to the end. And with that, we would really like to thank you once again.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Tuning in.
I have the possibility to talk to you and to your students.
And joining us on this podcast. I think we're going to link your profile. I think you're quite active also on LinkedIn. So anyone who would continue to, let's say, profit from Gerd's know-how and expertise, not only in this podcast, but also out of this podcast, make sure to follow him on LinkedIn. And other than that, Gary, do you want to say something in the end, or?
No, that was it. All the relevant links will be in the description. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.